This is a meeting of CSS Workforce New York Executive Committee, June 4th. Present for board members are Ernie Hartman, Jack Wheeler, Judy McKinney-Cherry, Mike Mishhook, Tim Driscoll, and joining all on Teams video conferencing, and Jim Griffin via teleconferencing in. And this meeting is being recorded. And Jack, it's all yours. I'm going to share my screen through some of it so folks can see the materials. Okay, thank you. Conflict of interest, if as always, if an item that you may have a potential conflict with comes up, please disclose that and recuse yourself. Start with meeting minutes. They've been distributed to you from the May 7th and May 11th. Could I get a motion to approve both of those, please?
This is Judy. I move them.
Ernie seconds.
Judy and Ernie, any questions? All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Carried. Okay. Board chair report, right to the April 2020 budget. Dan, please. Yep. So this budget is through the end of April. I have it up on my screen for those of you who want to look there. Looking at the categories, we're 83% of the way through the year, so we should be targeting 83% as our goals. Salary and fringe, if you look on the far right, we're projecting out to spend about 700 of the 870 total in the category. We're going to be coming under significantly expenditures in this category. Reason being is driven by the fact that lumped into and included in this salary and fringe line are the youth, the emerging workforce work experience, the paid internships. Basically in February, in March, they just sort of all, with the exception of 3 of them, kind of shut down. So we are significantly going to come in under expended on that line, and specifically within youth. Looking in the operations subcategory, we continue to be over on rent and utilities. It's the same thing. We have not actually been in, I haven't even been in the office to do the measurements and move the rent and utilities down into the 700 Corning Youth line for the admin space. So that is the driver of why we're over on rent and utilities. Professional services, between some legal fees, between some couple of different audit fees, we are just a smidge over on what our total estimated budget was there, but I'm not unhappy with that. Staff travel actually is going to come in a little under because, well, we're not traveling. Dues and memberships, we still got a couple that come up here in June. Outreach, we are going to be significantly under without running all the job fairs. And I mean, normally we would have spent about 10 grand alone just on various types of outreach between the regional job fair and Honell Bath area job fair that we normally hold in the spring in early summer. So that will come in under. Equipment and maintenance. Well, supplies, let me back up. Supplies are really still heavy. We have been working on stockpiling at least a basic number of supplies for when we do reopen the centers. So we have a couple thousand disposable masks. We got some cleaning supplies and some other stuff. So that's driven our supply line. Normally in an ongoing program year, we would be buying those supplies through the central office, and then over the course, as we kind of transfer them out to the center, you'd see those expenditures move down into the one-stop expenses from an accounting perspective to where they actually go to. You won't see that this year, more than likely, because we won't be pushing a huge amount of them out to there. Let's see, insurances, capital improvements, space holders. Everything else is largely coming in online as expected within that category. So our expenditure goal is 127. You can see the total accrued obligations are going to be around 132 at this point. So I think we're going to be in good shape. That will help compensate for a little of the underspending in payroll. On one-stop expenses, we are going to come in way underspent here. There's just no way around it. I mean, other than rent and utilities, there's no expenditures really going on in the one-stops. So we're going to be underspent there. Under program expenditures, you can see how things are playing out there. Contracted services, it looks really heavy. It's because we're obligating full years. But I think we're going to come in. They may actually come in a little bit under because they've had a staff opening for a little while. Training and OJTs, we still are pushing it quite a lot out the door. We are going to manage to figure out, knock on wood, to spend a little over $225,000 in those categories to support our business customers. Our top trainings, we didn't run the second one, obviously, but we were able to. I'm actually quite pleased that we were able to ramp up. For those of you that have kind of been watching these things over the years, we've almost never really had supportive services in the realm of $14,000. So I'm pretty pleased that staff are figuring out ways to creatively apply these supportive services to our job seekers. We did refunnel a lot of extra money, so you can see we are over budget on the tuition and incidentals, the ITA lines. We did, Ernie and his team did, they did push a lot of folks through on that front as well, although we do have quite a few of them on hold, waiting for the reopenings and stuff like that. All in all, it shows we're going to do about a 91% expenditure. So I will say that probably will be the number. The magic, of course, in my world, or our world, I should say, is trying to make that night. We're not judged on, hitting the 80% across the board, where we have to apply it to the various substreams. So projecting forward, we are going to, and this will, remember some of this because this will carry into the conversation when we kind of look at this year's initial budget. We will surely spend out all of the adult funds that we're required to, and maybe even be a little bit high on our adult expenditures. Dislocated worker, we are going to struggle, but I think we'll hit our 80% on the dislocated worker. On youth, there is no chance that we're going to spend all of the dollars that we have for the emerging workforce program. Two reasons. One, the monies that they were going to recapture last year, New York State graciously didn't recapture. So we were really pushing to spend out last year's excess plus this year's budget. So we very much run the risk of having to give back quite a lot of youth money. I will tell you, the state has not determined if they're going to give the youth money back or not. But there's the very real possibility we're going to give significant amounts. And by significant, between the money all of the money that they gave us back from last year, plus maybe $100,000 of this year's money. So grand total, probably worst case scenario, $300,000-ish. I don't know what to say other than I can't spend youth money if I can't put them in training. I can't put them in work experiences. I don't think it's for lack of trying. I know it's not for lack of trying. And then the admin monies will come in a little bit under, but that's okay, because those get disaggregated back into the pools. So April budget-wise, we're as good as we, I think, can be at this point. We've got a couple of more purchases out there. Our telephone system and our server in the administrative offices have basically given up the ghost. So I'm working with our telecom provider and Ed over at the IT place to secure a server. So we're going to spend out where we can, but some of this we are going to be, and we're not the only WIB in this. I don't want anyone to think this is just us. This is a phenomenon across the state. Workforce boards across the state are struggling to hit this 70 and 80% expenditures. So I will gladly field questions.
So Dan, is there any word from the association, from the association on what the WIB should be doing across the state at this time? Is there any word coming down on giving any guidance whatsoever?
So here's what I will say. We've been lobbying for some time now, both all the WIB directors, when we have our calls with the higher ups in DOL in Albany. We try to have somewhat regular calls on Wednesdays at 3 with the Albany DOL leadership. I will tell you that for quite a long time, while we were lobbying against it, they were pretty much telling us, and I don't want to sound like I'm complaining because they rightly needed to be focused on the UI problem. So that Albany DOL leadership didn't even pay any attention, honestly, to resolving this. So NIATEP has been actively involved in it. All the workforce boards have been involved in it. Finally, yesterday, so Karen Coleman, who's the deputy director, deputy commissioner or something, I forget her exact title at the moment. She's like number 2 up there, or 3. She mentioned that the state is going to put some attention to it. The federal rules do apply. I mean, we did ask the feds if USDOL could make a waiver. The feds' answer was that this isn't one of those immovable objects. It's in the legislation, and so they cannot regulatorily waive it. So the state is now looking at, the expenditure really does apply to the state, not to the local areas. New York State is one of the states that has chosen to drive the expenditure goals down to the local areas and apply it there, where the feds just apply it to the state. So the state's now trying to figure out if they're going to apply it to local areas or if they're just going to kind of just deal with it at the state level. That's the best I've got for you, Judy.
All right, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions on this? If not, could I have a motion to approve the April 2020 budget, please?
I move it.
So move.
Tim and Ernie, any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Thank you. All right, Dan.
All right. Let's see.
The
PY20 budget. Yep. So I want to kind of back up a little bit and show you. So hopefully everyone can see on the screen our revenue projections. So this is kind of where I start with a rough calculation. So the second year, so PY19 money. So the year we're ending, our NOAA was, and you can see here on this top line what our total amount was last July 1st. I think when we close out at the end of June 30th, I've made some guesstimations that I think our expenditures in each of the lines are going to hit those, which will ultimately leave us, if you look at the line that says PY19 estimated carryover, I think we're going to bring in about 100,000 of adult, about 70 of dislocated, about 90 of youth, and then the associated 30-ish on admin. So we've gotten our PY20 NOAs. So this is the estimates from the feds, the formula funds. And our portions have dropped noticeably. So I'm trying to get back to my, so everyone can see here. So this is our adult allocations. This is what we get as for planning numbers from New York State Department of Labor. They were a smidge late this year, but we did get them. So if you look here, this is the money for the PY20 adult money. So here is Chemung, Schuyler, Steuben. You can see last year, and these numbers will differ from what you saw because this is aggregated admin into there as well. So last year on the adult program, broad stroke, we got about $670,000. This July will only get about 537 for a drop of about 132, almost $133,000, just shy of a 20% cut on our adult funds. If we look at the dislocated worker, the Chemung, Schuyler, Steuben area here, not quite as grim. Last year we got about 393,000 of dislocated. We're projecting to get 369,000 this year, about a 6%, about a $23,000 drop on dislocated. And then on youth, the picture gets grim again down here. This year that we're ending, we had $671,000. They're projecting about 539. Another drop of 132,000, or again, just shy of 20%. So when I take those numbers then and I roll them into the revenue projections that you see here, you can see our total estimated amount this year is about $1.745 million, which is down from just under, last year we were about just a little over 2, so almost 2.1 million. So it's a pretty hefty drop. So I do set, so controlling the controllables and trying to figure out how much we want to spend and how much we want to budget. 80% of course becomes our target goal. 80% is a hard number to hit. So conservatively speaking, I try and guesstimate, and you can see the percentages here on this line. So for the putting together of this budget, I've kind of made available about 82% of our funds. So enough of the various funding streams to meet our goal, but not so much as to impact future years. Because if we are on a downward trajectory of the WIOA funds, we want to kind of, to steal someone's, we want to kind of flatten the curve. That's a horrible term, I guess, but we want to kind of smooth that out a little bit. And so that's where the 82%. So that leaves us total budgeting in terms of my guesstimations at this point of about just under $1.494 million. So that's what the revenue picture looks like that I'm basing it off of. I will tell you that this could change. If the state determines this year that they're not going to recapture money, then there could be a significant more amount of money in the youth stream. You could see the corresponding tick up in terms of admin as well. So realistically, you could see these numbers, particularly these columns here, the youth and admin columns, you could see them impacted tremendously. I think the adult, this is probably actually a smidge generous. We may not actually have this many adult dollars, and the dislocated worker could be a little too conservative, because we may carry in a little more than the 70,000. But those two, because of their transferability, you can kind of manage those as a singular pool right now. So I think that becomes a wash in those two columns, with youth and admin being the real outliers. So that all being said, if I then look at the PY20, kind of our working first cut for July 1 budget, down here on the bottom, I'm going to start down there. You can see the numbers that I'm targeting for. So you see the 1.745 million down here. That is our total, what I'm guesstimated total revenue that we could potentially draw in. And then you see the 1.494, which is that kind of expenditure goal based on the 82%. And then you see 0 zeros. Those are my checks. Those are how far am I off of my total budget. So you see there's 0. I played with this a fair amount, and I do different scenarios, and I went up to the wee last hours last night trying to do this. So I apologize for that lateness, but that's kind of what I'm trying to do. So again, looking up at the personnel budget, you see here, I'm suggesting that we whack over $100,000 out of our personnel line, about $108,000. How does that get accomplished? I kind of had mentioned in earlier meetings, I do retain all of the current funded FTE positions of WIOA. So I'm not suggesting at this point that you lay me off or any other staff off in terms of the full-timers. However, I have removed all flexibility. So in the past few years, I've tried to put in some money in these salary lines for some grant writers. When we went after various grants, I had some of those in there. I had some paid internships for project work for people to kind of work alongside our staff for different projects. You saw that we did the transportation study with Alstom and CAF and the railroad a little bit ago, where we hired Lisa. There's been a couple other instances where we've kind of had some folks do some project work for us. I've eliminated all of those ancillary positions and duties out of there. And then I took a big whack out of the youth funding. So you see a total, the net result there is about a $108,000 drop from 870 to 761 year over year. And I'm proposing, and I don't know if this number is right or not. If you see a little number here on the far right, our minimum expenditure goal of 669. In order for us to hit that 82% expenditure, we're not going to spend all 761. So I have to kind of guesstimate where we're going to come in within the category. So I'm guesstimating this category is going to hit about an 88% expenditure. That might be a little problematic because I've got no wiggle room in here in terms of extra staffing and things of that nature. And because I took such a heavy whack at the youth program, we could, if we come in at 92 or 93% versus the 88, it could put us over that 82% total expenditure goal. So bottom line, should we have staff turnover, I will be in no hurry to refill those positions as a way of hitting this 88% target here. Going down into operating expenses, I took, within this subcategory, I'm targeting just shy of a $27,000 cut for this category, 26.8, taking us from 159 to 132,000 year over year. The big areas, really, it's taking some trim. We did have to add some additional janitorial in our space in Corning, but pretty much everything else is we're trimming. So board-related expenses, there'll be very little, if anything, extra that we'll be buying there, which might, where would you see this? This would be things really you're going to see like coffee and donuts. You may not get Dunkin' Donuts. You may get, Jiffy Bake out of Dan's Kitchen at a board meeting kind of thing. But we'll start trimming all of those things down. Professional services, I've kind of whacked out anything other than really audit services, and I left $2,000 in there for legal just in case services. Staff development, this is not, we're going to have to develop our staff internally and find other ways to do that. Staff travel, I've whacked that about $5,000. I've told the staff that we're going to be traveling a lot less. We're going to use Teams a lot more. And so I think we're going to see some associated savings there. I might be a little conservative. One of the biggest users of staff travel, and rightly so, is the youth program. Because we do manage our youth program as a 3-county area and not by a career center, there was a fair amount of staff driving around. But the youth team has become very, very adept at providing remote services, to the point where I think we could see even more savings on the staff travel line. At this point, I'm not proposing any cuts to our dues or membership to various organizations. We're going to trim our postage a little bit. We're going to, once we get a new server, once we get our telephone fixed, we've already got new computers this year. I'm hoping that our equipment and maintenance line needs, there's very little else that's a big ticket item. So I think it's safe to take a whack at that line. Insurance is insurance. I don't see that going down. Same with payroll, GMS, and miscellaneous. I'm basically having that. At this point, I'm also saying, trying to realize, and this could be I'm torn on this line. I've played with this a little bit. So normally the past few years, I've budgeted about $20,000 for outreach. As I shared earlier, we are way under this year because we're not doing the numbers of job fairs. And I don't think job fairs are going to come roaring back, because I just, at least for a while. So I don't have concern taking a pretty good whack out of that line. My challenge or my thinking is that I don't think I want to completely get out of the outreach business. I think I want to try and keep a chunk of funds available to kind of figure out ways to, if we need to, procure some outreach activities. We're getting good with social media. We're getting some traction. The staff are doing it. I think we've got a better integration with our career centers that we've developed over the past 3 months, so that we can get it out more organically through the actual face-to-face stuff when we're able to do that as well. But I still don't want to take too much of a whack at this particular line quite yet. Capital improvements, meeting expenses, just they're really $100 placeholders in those categories. Special projects, I took a pretty good whack at that. Special projects would be like last minute things that we need to do here or there, or opportunities to partner on an event. So my suggestion is we're probably going to have to get lean and mean on those. I'm projecting, as you can see here, the 85% expenditure within that category. I think as long as we leave a little wiggle room in the special projects, we don't whack the outreach quite as bad. We may realize some additional savings in equipment and maintenance. I think the 85% is a pretty good target for that category. One-stop expenses, I'm dropping across the board. A lot of that is the technology upgrades we were going to buy this year. We've already done that, so I've taken there. We may realize some additional savings in the career centers in terms of things like envelopes and resume paper and some of the kind of those types of consumables. But I think it will be more than made up by the fact that we're going to have to buy more hand sanitizer, more wipes, more masks, more things of that nature. So I took a little bit of a trim on these line items, but I still left some money in there. So this 85%, I'm not sure on that. I don't know, but I think it's pretty reasonable guess there. Under program expenditures, this is where really the meat. I mean, traditionally last year we had 910,000 out of our budget was in this category. This year I'm projecting about 735, so about $175,000 whack in this subcategory. I want to trim the operator budget a little bit. We won't send all the youth to NIATEP. The contracted services, they've got some staffing. They've got a staffing gap that they've had for a couple of months now. So I think when you carry that forward, I think we'll see a little bit of savings over the contract periods. Training OJT customized. This took the single largest hit of any of our items. So we dropped it by about 102,000, but that still leaves us $200,000 in that category, which is still a pretty good amount, with a targeted expenditure of about 150,000. So that really gives us about a $15,000 a month projected burn rate on the OJT custom line, which takes us back about 2 years ago in terms of activity. But it still gives us a goodly chunk of money, and I think we'll still be able to have a presence out there. TOT, UCB, we're dropping back from having 2 to realistically having to do 1. So we're put 50,000 versus 75 in that line. Supportive services, I kept that up there pretty good at 25,000, down from 30. And mileage reimbursement for the travelers, I'm hoping that more folks will take advantage of some online opportunities. BOCES has some online, Corning has some online. They're out there. We've got eCornell that's kind of moving into the marketplace a little bit. I expect more of our training partners to offer online stuff. So I think mileage is an area where we could see some real savings over time. The ITA line, tuition and incidentals, we did take a little whack to that, but I still think it leaves us about $63,000 of actual hard expenditures. The hard part to tell you that, so 63,000 doesn't seem like very much, but if you look at how ITAs go, the ITA committee will commit $5,000 to train someone, but then after all the financial aid packages are done and things of that nature, we spend less per person net at the end of an ITA. So I still think at 63,000 on that category, combined with the TOT money, I mean, we've still got well over $100,000 in direct training scholarship support to individuals. Last year we had about 2.078 million. This year we had the 1.754 million, about a $323,000 drop. I targeted just under 1.494 million dollars expenditure goal. This is, and I'd love to field questions and comments and angst and thoughts and whatnot, but I'm as comfortable as I can honestly be with these numbers given what's going on in the world around me. So I talked a whole lot. Questions, please?
Wow. Okay. So Dan, do you've done I think just a superb job at really sort of taking a scalpel and being very, I wouldn't use the word whack. I think you've thought through this pretty clearly. From your perspective, how does this, you're taking care of this budget issue, today with us, but when you're looking out over the next year or two, do you see this as and I'll say over the next 2 years, do you see it as a permanent sort of change from your perspective in the budget, or do you think this is really just sort of a blip and then we'll be back in a better place in the next 18 to 24 months?
Oh, wow. That's kind of the $1 million question. I'm not going to lie to you, but I'll tell you, the short answer is I don't know. But kind of my underlying assumptions here. So my underlying assumption here in this is that I do want to keep the staff, the professional staff that we have in place the best we can, because I think no matter what, there's going to be a bump in phase 4. They're going to dump some training money out there, and I'm going to need trained staff to implement and spend off those dollars. So I'm hitting the pause button on any type of layoff considerations at all on that front. So that really is a big piece of how I've laid this out. Now, prognosticating and looking out. Normally, if you look back over the historical trends, someone gets elected and they want to make a splash, and so they change up the workforce system, and WIA becomes WIOA, or JTPA becomes JTPA2, or CETA becomes JTPA, or pick a transition. And that new person to make the splash, there's implementation money, there's excitement around this new program, and so they fund it generously over time. As that program gets older, maybe even gets past its authorization, is just being funded by continuing resolutions and things. You see this downward trajectory over time, and that's the historical pattern. So WIOA was authorized in 2014, so it's now 6 years old. I'd have to go back through and see where it's at, but it's nearing its end of its authorization life. So if I just take a pure history teacher view at this, I think it's at the federal level, it's a stagnant baseline type of things, maybe even dropping in depending on who gets elected in November. So that's kind of my history teacher sort of look at this. So I don't. That's where I'm at. I no matter what, well, that's where I'm at. So bottom line, I think we're going to see a big bump up. I think when this phase 4 comes out, I think they're going to dump monies on there. But I think the underlying base funds are going to be stagnant and probably dropping. So that's my short answer to your question.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, Dan, just so you know, Jack called me because he lost internet power at the county building. So I've got it on my cell phone here right now.
Okay.
I can kind of run things for him.
All right. Thank you. I appreciate that. I didn't, with sharing my screen, I can't see all my little bubbles as to who's here or not. Thank you.
Yep.
My biggest nervousness, I'm going to just be frank with everybody here. My biggest piece of nervousness is in program expenditures. We have spent 3 years now saying we've got all the training money in the world, and we've got, we've really built up mechanisms. You got the ITA committee reviewing people, and we've got a really good flow going there. We've got, businesses are already ramping up, and they're already coming at us to write OJTs. We got 3 knock on the kitchen table wood that are going to start on Monday. We have customized training grants out there where businesses are beginning to cross-train their employees that they have. They're kind of looking at the startup mode, and they want to cross-train them. And so we're looking at supporting some of that. So we spent 3 years building a machine. We spent 3 years training staff. We found efficiencies. We went to e-signatures to make it even faster and easier and more attractive for the business world. And now I'm trimming $102,000 from that line. I am nervous a little bit on this, because what's really the hardest, what's the most damaging to the system is a stop and start. So where July 1 comes, you got all this money and everybody takes it, and then by January you're out of money, and then you spend 6 months down and everybody forgets how to do an ITA or whatever. And then comes July, it's time to do it again. And it just becomes very damaging to the system, and kind of cutting these numbers that we're looking at does pain me. If phase 4 money doesn't come down the pike, then I think we have to look at some of these other subcategories above, like one-stop expenses, operating expenditures, and personnel, and say, we may have to trim those subcategories just to push money down to this bottom subcategory. I'm not a big believer in keeping overhead and infrastructure just for the sake of keeping overhead and infrastructure. We're an employment and training program, and I think how I've always managed this is that the bulk of our focus and energy needs to be in these program expenditures, these training grants and those types of services to the community. I know that's not how other workforce boards do it. They kind of do staff first, and whatever's left, they kind of put out in training. But we historically, and this was taught to me by Matt Schick, my predecessor, long ago, that CSS kind of looks at it differently. And I think it's the right way to do it. It does make me nervous long term that if phase 4 doesn't come, and if I'm correct in my assumption that we've got baseline level or declining, I think it's going to be traumatic and on the system a little bit.
Okay.
I feel like I gave you guys horrible news this Thursday morning.
Well,
I guess that's reality though.
yeah, we're in an uncertain time anyway, so it's the one thing I'll say, Dan, is what I'm seeing successful so far is that a lot of organizations are really becoming entrepreneurial, and they're really sort of looking outside of how they've done things in the past. And I think that the reality of your budget issues, you have some federal constraints that you have to follow. But I also think that there might be some opportunity in the gray area to be, a little more, to be thinking a little differently about how we operate. I don't have an answer though. I just know that I'm watching other businesses do that. They're figuring it out.
I will tell you, I would love, and I'm going to take that back. That's too crazy of a word, but kind of along those thoughts, Judy. We are not going to go back to the world of, unless forced to, anyways. We're not going to go back to the world of where the career centers are, where we drive the job seekers. We're going to be looking at driving job seekers to services at extended hours and days, and using technology and electronic means. What does that mean? What that means is this category called one-stop expenses here, where we're going to invest, at least $106,000 next year. That's hardcore infrastructure. And if we can make a shift, we always have to have some level of career centers out there, because there's always a slice of the population that will need that face-to-face type of interaction. But I think that particular subcategory is an area that we need to look at creatively. If we're going to invest that much money year over year, we've got to get a huge return on that investment, or we trim it. It doesn't mean closing centers necessarily, anything like that. It just means relooking at those spaces and what we're doing with them. So we are looking at that. We're having some conversations within staff world on that. But some of that also goes to the conversation that I want to have around some of the business, the business report and stuff like that. Yeah, operations and oversights, I think, is going to have a role to play in this, because I want to use that format to kind of look at some operational pilot / creative / entrepreneurial projects.
Okay.
So it's 8:45. I don't want to drag too long on it. What in a perfect world, what we'd have is an motion to use this as our starting July 1 budget that we'll keep an eye on and amend as we get clarity down the road.
Yep, I agree.
Okay. So is there a motion then?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Carries?
All right. So let me go find my, let's see, I did that one. I got to go back to my agenda here. Oh, ETPL updates. So one quick addition on ETPL. Corning Community College continues looking at some of their activities. They'd like to make sure that their Chemical Technology Associates program is on our eligible training provider list. It does line up. Phyllis has done her due diligence in terms of lining up with our demand occupations. They are a trusted training provider in the area. Courses and tuition costs are pretty much standard. There's I mean, they're a reputable source. So my staff recommendation would be to approve them on the ETPL.
Okay, is there a motion to approve?
I move we accept them.
I'll second it.
So motion and second, all in favor?
Aye.
That motion
Thank you.
carries.
Appreciate that. So looking at our contracts this year, so this is our update on our business contracts. So you can see where the OJTs are written in the funding stream and the amounts. You can see things really took off. We've got a fair number of them on hold. You can see the highlighted yellow, those ones are all on hold. So we've got some Hilliard, some TTAs, some Bests, some Shibong Heating that are on hold. They are firing back up. We've done contract amendments to kind of reinstitute and get those going again. So I'm pleased to see that we're not losing those positions or those trainees. They're coming off of hiatus and we're adjusting the training plans. Under customized trainings, there's a few out here that were on hold. I will tell you that the Heritage Arcus 2 Ben and the Schuyler Hospital, I've approved. There's amendments, so there'll be the contracts for those will be going as well, are firing back up again as well. All right. Otherwise, right now it looks like we've got we're on pace. Once we, assuming all of them rehold to we've got already written over $188,000 worth of contracts on these lines. So that's the report there. There's really no action taken. It's really more of a for information action. And then, so I want to have some conversation at the board meeting a little bit around this business intelligence report. I've shared it with folks. I guess I'll just throw out there and kind of, you know, what you guys are, what are your thoughts on this? Is there anything that's gleaned from this? Do you want to talk about it at the full board level? Would you rather not? I guess I'll open the floor for some conversation on it.
Well, I think that it's always helpful. I'll just say this in general. I think it's always helpful to have a discussion with the board. That's a real discussion. That's not just a spoon feeding session. So I think that having a discussion with the board is always a good idea. But I think that I think that it's important that we know, you know, what it is you're trying to get out of the discussion, Dan.
Okay, all right.
I mean, if you're looking for sort of approval, if you're looking for new ideas, if you're looking
Sure.
for
Okay.
what out of that.
All right. So when the downturn started, just the history of kind of where this came from. When the downturn started, we were kind of in the dark and we didn't know what businesses were doing. And if you kind of think back to those first couple of weeks when, you know, we were supposed to go to 75% and then 50 and then 25 and then overnight it was 100. We had zero visibility in anything. And so we had a business team that was kind of like, what are we going to do? I said, well, we need to be doing what we are supposed to, which is reach out and find out what the workforce impact is here and what can we do to still engage. So that was kind of the underlying assumption about why we did this. And so our goal was to really try and touch base with all those businesses, or as many as possible, to kind of gather information. And it was meant to generate meaningful engagement. And that was kind of really our definition. And it was very loose because what's meaningful for one employee could be not meaningful for another. So, but it was really, what it was not intended to be was just an email or a, you know, hey, how you doing? Good. Yeah. You know, how's your kids? And hang up type of thing. It was supposed to be a meaty conversation. So as we progressed on that and we were learning things, and I was I was having regular conversations with our business team when they were doing this to kind of pick their brains on specifics or trends and what are they hearing and thoughts. And I shared it in a number of formats on some of the things that we were feeling. So some of this news, if you know, may not have even seemed like all that new and splashy because we were kind of sharing it along the way. but I wanted to have a wrap up conversation around this. So this is really, so I asked the bin team, and I will tell you, I did zero editing of this document. This is truly what the staff that did the task felt were the most important pieces of this. Bottom line, businesses, particularly the small ones, enjoyed this type of contact. They were frank. The small businesses were feeling like the big businesses were getting all the attention. The big businesses already had HR departments that could handle a lot of this stuff. Where were they? They were trying to figure out how to survive. I mean, this is not news at this point to us. What businesses were asking for help with. These are kind of the real thoughts and highlights from the staff. Here's what I would love to at least ponder on. When I read between the lines on this, I think CSS has an opportunity to, or a decision point, maybe leading to an opportunity. I hear when I read this, I hear when I'm as part of this, that if you're a business person in the 3 counties and you don't have an HR department, you need help from time to time. You need to have better access to training supports, OJT customized. You need to have better access to technical help. And I think CSS has the opportunity to kind of look at what we do with our business engagement and maybe prioritize businesses below a certain threshold of number of employees. I think it might even help us better with our market penetration in terms of helping those, because just by virtue of there's more of them. If we kind of looked at what we do. So right now, OJTs are a flat $2,000. I think we have, and I'm double checked to the extent, but I believe we have some flexibility on even some of our business grants, OJTs and customized, that if you're a smaller business, I think we can maybe do maybe a little higher percentage in the case of the customized trainings, or maybe a higher overall amount for a smaller business. So maybe if you've got, under 50 employees, maybe your cap is $3,000 or something along those lines. And so my thought would be, honestly, right now the team really, I think we do a pretty decent job. But if you look at the people that are taking advantage of our training grants, they are usually the little bit bigger businesses or places with HR departments. It's the path of least resistance. You've got professionals in place that can move some of this stuff along. Would we want to look at maybe sharpening or incentivizing or creating a better focus on those smaller businesses by tweaking where we can? The pros is, I think it's a good thing to do. The cons are, it's not as efficient. If I'm interfacing with a St. James Hospital, I'm interfacing effectively with, what are they at, like 500 employees now? Or Arnott Health, or Hilliard, or an Alstom, or pick a big company. I'm hitting big opportunities, big pools of workers. If I'm writing grants with mom and pop Main Street type of operations, it's become, using pure data, it looks less efficient. So I think we lose some ROI. I think we decrease our efficiency on one hand if we do that. It becomes a little more staff intensive. I mean, it takes the same amount of time to write a customized training grant for 200 as it does for 10. So that's just my thought. I see a decision point. Do we want to keep chugging along like we are right now? And I don't think that's a bad choice, because I think we're doing a pretty good job. Or do we want to maybe look at taking this opportunity to restructure and target the smaller employers? That's really what I'm hoping to get some clarity from the board on is, does this impact anything in specifically in those areas?
Okay.
Yeah, so I guess it'd be worth having this discussion at the board level, is what you were asking for.
Yeah, do we want to have this conversation? Do you want to noodle on it some more as exec before, and I take this off the agenda for this end of this, for June and fill it with other things? I don't know. I will tell you that there's no other workforce area that did the level of business engagement and tracking and trying to actually engage with their businesses that we've done. I will tell you, I've not shared the actual report itself with other WIB directors because I want our board to have first dibs on this and I don't want anyone getting out ahead of it. But I will tell you that no one else out there, I mean, not even New York City, they've been so focused on other things that no one really engaged with the businesses. And they were truly surprised at this data and what it means. And their thoughts now is why weren't we doing that with our business folks as well? So I don't know. It's 8:57. I guess. What are your thoughts on it? And then if you know, how do you want to move forward or not move forward with this information?
I think I'll just say this. I think that if it is a concise, here it is, very, 3 bullets, 4 bullets, not a real deep dive, and then get some feedback. I think that if you go into it in the level of detail that you did with us just now, I think you're going to lose a lot of folks, right? Because they're not intimately familiar with everything, right? So I think that I'm in support of us having it on the agenda, but I think that I think it's important that it be really clear what it is you're looking for from them right up front, and then give them the sort of in a short, 3, 4, 5 minutes, and then open it up for discussion. But don't be surprised that there's no discussion. So you're going to almost have to pepper the conversation with some questions, specific questions.
I don't think that you're saying that we turn all of our focus to small business with this document, but I think with the larger customers, they've had 3+ months to discover that they can do as much or more with less.
Yeah. Yep.
Where our smaller businesses don't have that luxury. And we really need to get Main Street opened up again.
Yeah, you're right, Ernie. I think that, that's what I'm hearing here is that several of our employers have realized that they don't need as much real estate, and they also have realized they don't need as many people to do. They've learned what it is that's core to the business. Versus nice to have versus must have. And I think that's probably the biggest difference. As they're tightening their belts, at least, and again, I'm speaking from a very seasonal environment here. But as they're tightening their belts, they're realizing that some of their staff was really a luxury, not a necessity.
Yeah, I would agree with that as well, Judy.
Yeah.
And I will tell you, that's kind of what we were hearing, in terms of the BIN team. We were hearing that in terms of our interactions with them directly, and which is kind of the core as to my thought is as a workforce board, do you want us to kind of stay under current existing policies and procedures and structures and kind of keep driving forward? Or do you want us to maybe tweak our policies and look for opportunities to incentivize and support our smaller mom and pops?
I think you've got a couple of things and this is a great conversation to have. I think there's a couple of things. One is you never want to leave your core mission. And so once you start advocating, and I've said this to the chambers as well, if all you're going to do is I'm going to take an intake and then transfer you over to another organization, is that really the highest and best use of your time? You can do that with a website. You can do that in other ways. So I think it comes down to sort of what it is. Like, to me, I would like to see, you're talking to businesses and you're having that conversation. I want to know what is that conversion rate from the conversation to a training contract. or to an apprenticeship. I want the conversion. I'm looking for, was it just a feel good conversation, or was it really directive that said, okay, this is what we do. What is that conversion rate? And it's easy to make that first call. It's hard to actually make that second one, because now they have an expectation you're going to fix something. And I only say that because that's what we're doing here. We literally did help desk. We quite literally did help desk here, where people, and it wasn't, we didn't refer anyone anywhere else. It was, okay, let's get this done. Let's get your PPP, or let's get your UI, or let's get your shared work program done. So I share that because I think it's really important to understand what you're getting your staff into. Because that's all I'll say. I think you need to think about that. And to me, I think it's awesome that you did it. And I think now what I want to see is the conversion from that effort into how it impacts our business from a workforce perspective.
Okay.
And because there's just crickets out there, I can tell that I probably am alone in this feeling. So I will stand down and let the rest of the committee weigh in.
I won't say that I'm not quiet because I'm disagreeing with you. I'm quiet because mentally I try to process what that would mean and translate that in terms of activities and uptick rates. I mean, I will tell you that the more businesses I talk to, the lower my uptake rate becomes, just because it's a, believe it or not, and we jokingly say this whenever we talk to a new business, and for us, it's mind-bogglingly difficult to give money away. I mean, I've got free stuff and I literally can't give it away. When I walk up to a business, or Kelly does, or Laura does, or Carrie Ann, or picking it, and we say we've got training grant money. We want to help you. We want to give it to you. We will make this as easy as possible. And the uptake rate is so low. And then you'll walk into another group, and all of a sudden you talk to 6 or 8 people in that group, and then 5 of them will come to you and follow through. And we've not been able to figure out the patterns, other than we've just got a champion somewhere in the organization that do it, or gatekeepers we call them. But just trying to find that right staff person. But I mean, we plan to, and we want to follow up. I mean, I will tell you, just from a staff perspective, they want to continue having conversations with the small mom and pops. They really do. They also, I mean, they were the ones that were actually talking to these small companies, and they, it hit them that they really, really see a need here. But to go down that road might mean a different look. I don't think anyone, I would never advocate to abandon any business of any size in my area. I don't pick winners and losers that way. But just kind of looking at ways to make ourselves more attractive to that smaller group. And then there will be, to be honest with you, going to your idea around data driven. I mean, if we focus on these groups, our efficiencies on paper, numerically speaking, our efficiencies, I believe, would actually drop. It just would. When I talk to a company with an HR department, I've got a probability of 1 in 3 of getting that HR department to engage and write a contract. I'm making that number up because I don't have a statistical number off the top of my head, but probability of 1 in 3 of making that happen. When I'm talking to a mom and pop on Main Street, owner operator, about our programs, I mean, maybe 1 in 10, 1 in 20 of them actually do the uptake on it. Because for them, they've got to figure out how to keep the doors open today, how to manage this, how to pay the bills, and then, take on this additional task over here. And that's just the realities of how they look at it. That being said, if I'm doing a massive outreach and I only get 1 in 10 of 2,000 small businesses, versus 1 in 3 of 50 large businesses, I'm actually doing more impact, across the geographic region. But on paper, on one hand, it looks like I'm less efficient. So that's just kind of that's kind of some of the calculations going on in the back of my mind is what that looks like.
Hey, Dan, this is Jim. Can you hear me?
Yep.
We've been doing that for 30 years through our chamber with small businesses, and it's very difficult. We talk to all the businesses, small businesses, big businesses. Small businesses are not going to hire a person because you're going to give them $2,000.
Right.
They know that there's a program around and they're going to hire somebody. They very seldom will ever look for help. I mean, we look at those businesses. We talk to them constantly. We write to them. We have like 300 members of our chamber that we keep in touch with all the time. And it's very few of them hire a person because they're going to get an incentive. And they hire them, and the problem with them is that if they add somebody to their staff, a small business I'm talking about, they'll add them because it's kind of a knee jerk. I got to have somebody. I'm going to go ahead and hire them. And they hire the person, and then if we do get involved in writing a contract with them, the difficulty is they don't stay there. And so you find yourself constantly writing and rewriting to cover a position that they've established, but they haven't given a lot of thought to the long term. So it's dealing with a bunch of small businesses that I think is going to take away a lot from your efforts because there are thousands of them, and you can't get to all of them, and most of them don't even want to hear about it. So it's a tough situation.
Jim's right. You're right, Jim.
I think your efforts I think you're doing fine the way you are. I mean, the occasional small business would be, a board member sees somebody that wants it, but to take staff time to set up a program to talk to thousands of small businesses would be to me, would not be very productive.
That's the type of decision point that I'm actually kind of looking for is that right there. Do we want to keep doing what we're doing? Do we want to use this new information to make some changes or not? So thank you. That's exactly what I'm looking to get a feel for.
So then the question is, do you want to have the conversation with the full board, or you just want to stop it here? That's really the next question.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep. Yeah.
Or do you want to further discuss more at the next executive meeting, once people have been able to think about it more?
And I don't think you want to spend half an hour at a regular board meeting discussing something that probably isn't going to work very well. But that's I think you're doing a great job with the ones the way you're doing it now with and the larger businesses understand it, but the smaller ones don't. And a lot of the smaller ones don't want you even interfering with them. It's almost like, here comes somebody from the government and they're trying to help me out. And it's not a good atmosphere right now.
Yeah. We run into that.
What's tough with the status quo is we don't know what the status quo is anymore.
Yeah. I mean, we can keep our messaging, we keep our policies in place, and we can maybe keep an eye towards, are we seeing more mom and pops, follow through and attach with us as a result of some of these outreach efforts? And then I can kind of maybe report back some of that, and we can look at some trends that way. And see versus, and before we engage and spend a lot of time rewriting policies and looking for, potentially loopholes in the legislation to allow us to do things.
Dan, I got to run. I got another meeting right now. So
okay, all right. So that's good conversation, I guess. So may I posit from the conversation that maybe we at least pause we don't go to the full board with this information. We at least touch back with the exec one more time before we go from there.
I
And then-
agree.
Yes,
That's okay.
Okay. All right.
agreed.
All right. And then other than that, a motion to adjourn, I think, is our last item there, Mike.
So moved. So moved.
So move, so move, so
Motion.
move.
So moved, so moved.
All in
All
favor?
right.
All right.
And
All right. Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.